what's the best way to explain the rules to a game? To get people to play a game, which is, just a system of rules and ways of interacting with the game world, you need to get them to understand both what they're trying to accomplish and all of the different levers and buttons and things in the system that they can manipulate in order to try to do that. And it's kind of difficult and often really, really boring. There's a bit before you play lots of games where you have to try and sit down and figure out what the rules are, how the system works, before you can start engaging with it. And so I'm going to talk about a few different divisions between different ways to explain games to people with the overall intention of posing, are there better ways to do this that they've not thought of yet? If there are, please come and tell me. So I'm going to be talking about diegetic and non-diegetic explanations of games. I'm going to be talking about game-controlled explanations and player-controlled explanations, and example-based and process-based, which I'll go into a bit more detail into when I get to each individual ones. So firstly, the diegetic-non-diegetic divide. Do you try to explain the rules to the game within the world of the game? Do you step outside the game and say, this is how it works, soon we're going to be playing a game. When we are playing the game, you will be trying to get all of the balls over into that corner. The way you do that is by picking up a ball with your toes and hopping over and depositing it there. Or do you say, hello astronauts, welcome all of you. As you can see, the moon is going to explode unless we cover it with these very important anti-explosion devices. So video games with narratives almost always try to explain things within the world. You go, oh, you've woken up, you're a bit confused. A soldier pops up and tries to tell you what you're meant to be doing, and says, hurry up, come with me, we need to go and shoot the bad guys. Press A to do that, by the way. Board games, for example, almost always do it completely outside the game system. So they say, sit down with this 16-page rulebook and argue about it and read it for half an hour, and when you think you've all finally got it figured out, then you start playing. I've got a couple of board game rule sets here. This is one for a game called On Guard, which is a quite nice fencing game by Gramazio, and it just says, the basic game offers an easy way of playing the game. The game board shows a fencing piece of 23 spaces and 2 scoring tracks numbered 1 through 5. Each player chooses one of the swordsman pieces and one of the corresponding scoring stones, and it just goes on like that for 4 pages. It's a quite short rule book. Very occasionally, board games try to explain things within the world of the game, and so this is a game called Space Alert by a designer called Vlada Chvatal. It's an amazing game. It's a cooperative game where you're trying desperately to fly a spaceship through dangerous space without any real control of how it's working. There's a computer that you need to nudge within the game every 3 moves, and if someone doesn't remember to do that, all of the lights go out again within the game. This is just on the board, you go, oh no, all of the lights have turned out, and then everyone's next move gets delayed. And it's a really, really lovely, wonderful game. He's given it a rule book which tries to explain all of the rules within the world of the game. It takes about an hour of reading through to get to the first play. And it's nicely written. It's written in world, it's quite funny. Friends and family, we are gathered here to remember the extraordinary courage and heroism the departed showed in service to their... Oh, sorry, wrong group. Here we are, and you get this message about how to play, and also about the fact that the spaceship is terribly derelict and you're probably going to die, which you mostly do. And it's really nicely written, and it's just terrible to try to learn. It's awful. It's absolutely... I've tried to learn this game with about 3 different groups, and we've all had to start reading it out in a sarcastic tone of voice really early on, just to get through the struggle of trying to learn the rules of the game while they're being explained in a plot way. But video games, as I say, do this almost all the time. Most of Coney's games do their explanations within the world of the game, and it's lovely. So it's kind of a what's appropriate to the game sort of thing, rather than something that necessarily has a right or wrong answer. But just generally speaking, I would like to have a better grasp of of what's the best way to do that and what's the least likely to annoy people and how to get things into people's heads in the most efficient way. The next division that I want to talk about is player-controlled versus game-controlled. Whether you go through at your own pace and look at the bits of the rules that you want to and flick forwards or backwards, or whether there's a voice of a game telling you stuff. Again, video games mostly do this in a relatively player-controlled way. You can usually go back and say, no, tell me what A does again. You can replay tutorial levels if it's the sort of thing that has a tutorial level. And again, board games are generally similarly very, very player-controlled. You can skip back and forward. Live games and games where you gather lots of people together, it's much, much harder to do that because you've got so many people simultaneously trying to learn the rules, and there's always going to be some people who have questions that they don't fully understand, and then there's going to be some people who do understand the rules but also want to know how far they can push them, and so they're going to ask questions about, is it cheating if I do this thing X? Is it cheating if I, stick sticky tape to my toes in order to pick up the red ball? And maybe it is, maybe it's not, but you don't want them to be bringing those possible exploits in the system to everyone's attention. You want it to be able to be people to discover these things for themselves. So the question of how you get rules into people's heads when you've got a pile of people all in front of you is even more perplexing. Again, I guess Coney games mostly tend to do it with a voice of a game because it comes from such a sort of a theatrical point of view, and getting the rules of the game from the game is also getting the experience of the story from the story and its experience as a whole. But if you're just trying to get to the bit where people play things faster, what is the best way of doing that without necessarily having everyone bickering at you for minutes and minutes on end? And finally, whether it's best to explain the processes of the game and the exact details of how it works, or whether it's best to just show a game happening and let people figure it out for themselves to some extent. Sophie, can you come and do a thing with me? What I'm going to do now is play a game called Danish Clapping, which Sophie already knows. I'm not going to tell you how it works. Sophie wins, I lose. So the way that game works is you slap your thighs and each player independently puts their hands either up, to the right or to the left, and then they do it again independently choosing which one they're going to do. But if you ever do the exact same thing as the other player, then on your next move you slap your thighs and then you clap hands with them. And if you get out of sync, or if you go to clap when you're not meant to clap, or if you forget to slap your thighs in between, or if you fail to clap when you should have, which was my flaw then you're out, you lose. And obviously for that game, you kind of need both. If I just tell you those sentences and say, now go and play Danish clapping, I can say from experience that doesn't work. You cannot really teach people Danish clapping through some sentences or through some writing. If you just play the game and go, come on, you get it, don't you? Don't you? No, you don't. So you do need some of each, but the question of how to balance those and how to weight those and combine them again in this desperate attempt to get people to understand the system in either the most efficient or the most fun or the most engaging way possible is an essentially Gramazio one. I normally feel like I ought to have a conclusion, but I was explicitly told that this was about having questions. So these are essentially my questions. What are the advantages and disadvantages of doing these different ways? And are there things about funneling systems and how they work into people's heads that would make them more satisfying or more efficient or more fun, that games have yet to think of? In 15 years, will we be much better at this? And if so, how? Thank you.